With the rise of leg locks in wrestling in recent times, it seems like the closed guard has kind of taken a backseat. Now, practically speaking, it definitely is very important to spend a lot of time on those skills in the current meta. However, the closed guard is still a very important part of a modern no-gi game, and it's unfortunate whenever I hear people talk only about using it as a stalling tactic or staying in the neutral pocket. So with that said, let's get into this week's study guide for the closed guard.
Hey, let's go.
Alright, so what are some benefits to the no-gi closed guard? So, as I've said before, I think the no-gi closed guard is an underutilized position. One of the greatest advantages is that when in closed guard, it puts you on the offensive while putting your opponent in a position where they need to open up that guard in order for them to either advance position or seek to counter and submit. In this clip here, we can see Kate Rotolo working to get out of closed guard, while Roberto Jimenez seeks to control posture and movement. This puts him in a situation where he could work his attacks or stall if the time is running low. Even though on a surface level, it seems like putting someone in closed guard puts you in a neutral situation, a player with a strong closed guard can set up two different kinds of dilemmas where, one, if you win the upper body battle, then you could start attacking the traditional submissions. Two, if opponent wins the battle for posture and they can actually stand up and start escaping, then you can work on sweeps or leg lock entries. And just a side note, I just wanted to clarify that when I mentioned being on the offensive, I also want to include utilizing sweeps as well as advancing position. Now, a final note that I wanted to mention is that closed guard is actually very creative. Now, as we'll see, we'll be going over a few of the different systems that closed guard can kind of branch off into. However, it's really cool to see that people have kind of taken a lot of these moves and then kind of built it upon themselves based on, their body types and personalities. Okay, so for the beginners out there, I just want to call out that I think, and this is totally my opinion, but I think submissions are best learned in closed guard, especially submission mechanics. And my reasoning with this is that, say for like the armbar, for example, whenever we're drilling it in the closed guard, it seems like the posture is already broken, and then we can kind of work with our partners to kind of feel out what the breaking mechanics are. And the fortunate thing with closed guard is that there are a plethora of sweeps and attacks that you can initiate and start learning immediately. That said, a common theme that I do see with a lot of the closed guard instructional, especially ones that have a system in place, is that there's a general tendency to focus on these four submissions. Now, omoplata and kimura are an interesting one because a lot of the times omoplata is used as a sweeping or advancing position, whereas instead of a actual submission to end the match. And kimura as well, in the Enter the System Kimura DVD, Danaher talks a lot about utilizing the kimura as a progressive method of attack where you can use that kimura grip to either sweep, or if it gets really, really deep, then you could use it as a submission. Now, a lot of people may say that the omoplata isn't a good submission position, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. However, utilizing the omoplata to start advancing position can be very powerful, and it keeps you on the offensive. I kept omoplata number 1 on this list so that it could count as like a baseline for any beginners just starting out. So I'm going to briefly talk about the chart that I made. Now, if anyone's interested in utilizing this chart, follow me at BJJDrillers on Instagram, and I'll send you a link to the full-size JPEG. You could definitely watch and study these topics in any order that you like, but basically I kept the green as the foundational content that will build knowledge for more advanced instructionals that you'll watch. The yellow category are key concepts that are a bit more important. And then finally, like the orange category is kind of optional it just depends on how deep you want to get into learning the system. Another point I should mention is that I made larger boxes for topics that I think require more time, focus, and are skill points towards. All right, so starting off, we have New Wave Closed Guard by John Danaher. Now, this is an awesome instructional because this gives you a 101 of all the possibilities of closed guard. And then this is kind of where the creativity starts to build off. Some of the best insights that I've learned from this instructional was how to take the back from the side scissor position. So immediately it's one move and putting you a step ahead to chasing the back. And then the second thing was being able to attack leg locks from closed guard. A huge theme in the New Wave series is to always keep your opponent on the offensive. And so it's about chaining upper body attacks with lower body attacks and to keep your game a step ahead of your opponents. All right, moving on, I wanted to talk about the clamp guard. In my opinion, spending a lot of your skill points on the clamp guard is very important because A general theme that I see whenever someone's trying to be offensive in close guard is that eventually they'll have to open up and start creating angles. Not only is the clamp guard mechanically already at those advantageous angles, it puts you a step above the traditional close guard, and you could start initiating your attacks and generating a really effective game from the clamp point. Furthermore, I think Brian Glick has a lot of really good free content on his YouTube channel on the clamp guard, and also, like, he's a really good instructor. Not only does he show getting to the clamp guard from close guard, but he shows getting to the clamp guard from almost all the pinning positions. Now, when I started learning how to attack from close guard, I was struggling a lot with actually finishing and getting into those submission positions. And I think a reason looking back now was because I didn't respect any of these positions. And I certainly didn't study these positions as separate positions from the close guard by itself, but kind of like sub positions from the close guard. What helped me on my journey was learning how to recognize these positions, getting into these positions first, and then initiating the actual submission attempt. Moving on, I want to shout out the close guard instructional by Craig Jones. So this one's really neat in that it shows the interplay between the 3 submissions from close guard and how to chain them together to kind of base your game and kind of set up dilemmas from there. Also, there's some really neat finishing mechanics in this instructional that have really honestly like changed my game. So the Williams guard is a fun instructional for me, and actually, although it talks a lot about the Williams guard, I think the main takeaway for me from this instructional was the transitions from omoplata. Prior to watching this instructional, I didn't really respect the omoplata transitions as much, but this is definitely something that I'm going to be playing with in the future. Also, I think learning how to lock up the Williams guard helps with learning how to lock up the rubber guard in the future, especially like the first beginning positions such as New York and New Jersey. Oh, and by the way, Williams guard is called London in the rubber guard system. All right, so as a 10th Planet guy, I have to give a shout out to the rubber guard. The best resource to learn rubber guard is the Nibiru forums on the 10th Planet website. It's got basically like 10 years worth of content. The site and the videos are super well organized, and not to mention they're absolutely hilarious.
That's my guy right there. That's Joe Hogg.
Thank you.
That's a good guy.
Rubber guard is super fun and creative, but it also requires a lot of dedication to figuring out a path that works for you. All right, finally, and this is kind of going beyond the scope of a close guard system, which is K-guard. So K-guard is now getting into the realm of attacking legs and kind of advancing position from there. I wanted to keep K-guard in this video because I found that in my experience, it was best learned from close guard instead of from standing. And again, going into the idea of eventually being able to hit an offensive attack or maneuver, you have to open up your close guard. K-guard is the sequence of what happens when you completely open up and try to take advantage of openings, start to invert, and then start to enter into leg entries. And all in all, and this is a big point that I wanted to mention in the study guide, is that there's really 2 big paths to attacking a close guard. Number one, like you either win the upper body battle and you start to work the 3 traditional, like the omoplatas, the arm bars, and the triangles, or the openings come up based on someone trying to stand up and then they win that battle. And you can either work for sweeps, but also go into K-guard and going into leg entries from there. All right, so that's all that I have for this week's study guide. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. There's definitely a plethora of information on the close guard, but again, like I said, like close guard is super creative and a lot of people have different approaches to it. This is just my personal take on what I would watch and what I would study in the future if I want to learn close guard. I really hope that this has helped you in creating a study plan. If you've liked this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And just remember, if you have time to kill, you have time to drill. Peace.